Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for our webinar on Vertical Response API, plug into the Vertical Response API. My name is Jill, and presenting with me today is Rob from our partner team, and he's going to take you through all kinds of things you need to know about using the API. Just a couple things before we get started. First of all, this will be around 45 minutes. At the end, there will be time for Q&A. So if you do think of some questions along the way, go ahead and type those into the box that you see in your GoToWebinar window, and we'll be happy to answer your questions at the end. One of the questions we get at every webinar we do, even when I make this announcement, is this being recorded? And the answer is yes, we are recording this webinar. I will put this up on our help site next week. I usually put them up about a week after the webinar. So look for that on the help site next week. So if you want to come back and refresh your memory on the API, we'll have that available for you. So with that, I am going to hand this over to Rob.
Thanks, Jill. So as Jill said, my name is Rob Z. If you've done anything with the API before, you already know me because I am the Partner Integration Manager here, and I am the API guy. So we're going to talk about what the API is all about, kind of start with a high-level business overview of what you can do with it and why you'd want to use it. And then we'll dive into more of a geeky area where I'll kind of show some workflow diagrams and how you'll do some of the more common functions that most people ask about when they want to use the API. So we're going to start, like I said, what is the API and why you should care? Trust me, you should care. It's very powerful and allows you to do a lot of the things that that our basic site may not necessarily be able to cover because they're so advanced and they're so specific. We'll also talk about how the API can add value to your product, especially if you are a partner, and then we'll get a little technical. So what is the API and why you should care? The API stands for Application Programming Interface, and the best way for me to think about this, or the best way to describe this, is when you go to Vertical Response through a browser, you're using our website to create lists and create email, and you're interacting with buttons and links and images and all the things you expect from a website. Well, an API is exactly the same thing, but it's for programming, it's for language. So instead of working with buttons and links, you're working with methods and parameters, and you're interfacing with it directly using code method calls. The most important piece, though, to walk away with when it comes to the API is that anything you can do with email marketing on our website, you can do with our API, and so much more, especially when you integrate it with your existing data, your existing databases and your existing processes. Now, the key benefit of using the API is you can leverage our superior deliverability. I'm not going to read this. You know what it means. You can go to Vertical Response, and you know why you're using VR. You're using us because we have great deliverability, strong ease of use, and, of course, we're well established in the marketplace. You know that we maintain strong relationships with our ISPs. You know that we're going to get that email out to your customers as quickly and efficiently as possible. And the great thing about the API is you can take all of that, all the things that we've spent. By the way, it's our 11th birthday today.
It is.
All the things we spent 11 years building, you can take advantage of and integrate directly into your software very simply, very straightforward, no matter what platform you're using, no matter what language you're using. Now, I did mention that everything you can do on the website with email marketing, you can do with the API. There's still some things that are not supported by the API as of this time, and that includes our survey, postcard, and marketing calendar tools, but it also means that our events and Roost, if you're familiar with the social integration that we've been doing with Roost, that's currently not available. Now, I don't want to oversell here, but my hope is that very, very soon, this slide won't exist, just so you know. So how does our API add value to your product? I kind of decided to do this by talking in terms of challenges and solutions so that you get an idea of why you might want to use the API, like what's out there that you're trying to accomplish that the API can help you do. So the first challenge is your system stores opted-in email addresses you'd like to market to. For example, you're a customer resource management system. You've already got some kind of database that contains email addresses. Maybe it's because those are the people who have signed up for your blog. Maybe it's for the people who have purchased from you on an e-commerce site. One way or another, you have that data and you really want to make it actionable. Our API list management methods will allow you to dive into whatever data source you've got. Of course, you'll have to write the code to do this, but it'll allow you to export that data from your data sources and immediately put it into vertical response in an automated fashion. Now, as of right now, you know that you can export a lot of that data as a CSV, go into your vertical response account, go to the list management tool, go click on new list, go upload list through CSV. That's a very manual process. You can do that right now. With the API, you can automate that so it all happens behind the scenes, either with a push of a button or with a scheduled task or any other way that makes sense with your workflow. The API can automate that for you. Let's say you already create HTML formatted documents. You've already got your own templates for email. Maybe it looks like your blog site. Maybe it looks like your website. You've got really, really talented staff folks, talented designers on your staff, I should say. And they're producing some phenomenal work. And what you want to do is you either want to provide that to your marketing team, or if you're a partner and you're reselling our services, you want to provide that to your customers. You can take that HTML and those images, you can host them on your server, and through the API, pass them automatically into our tools. From there, you can either single sign in your users into vertical response to complete the editing, or if you've got all the content, you've got the complete email already created on your site, and you just want to send it through our system, you can do that too. Either way, you can pass that content to us, send it out through our system, take advantage of our deliverability and all of our tracking and all the goodies you get with the vertical response, and be able to pull all that reporting back into your system to do with as you please, to find out how engaged your customers are, to find out how successful you're doing over time. It's completely up to you. It's completely up to your imagination. And this actually kind of dives into single sign-on. If you are reselling our services, you are a CRM provider. You are a CMS provider. CRM, by the way, Customer Resource Management, CMS, Content Management System. If you are a provider of those kinds of tools, and you want to provide email marketing to your customers without having to develop your entire email marketing suite yourself, you can take advantage of vertical response and go as deep as you want. You can have it so that you control the entire end-to-end user experience, email creation, list management, and just use vertical response as the engine that drives that. Or you can take advantage of single sign-on. What single sign-on allows you to do is take control over the aspects that you want. And then once you get to the point where you want to pass it over to our tools so that your customers can use our email creation, our list management, our reporting, whatever that may be, you simply sign them into their account automatically. And they don't need to have their password. They don't need to enter anything else. So it can actually be a nice seamless transition from your system to our system. It's a phenomenal way to take advantage of our partner program and really make it look like vertical response is part of your own system. Now, let's say you want to do what I just described. You want to have a complete system. You've got all of the email creation, all of that's done, fine. Use vertical response as the engine. I call this the custom user interface option. That means that instead of dropping anybody into our tools, you want to control the entire experience. You want to make it look like you've built everything yourself, but you just don't want to have the hassle of deliverability and all that. We got a whole staff of folks who are dedicated just to maintaining those relationships with the ISPs and making sure that we stay off of the blacklist, making sure that your email campaigns wind up in the inbox. You can take full advantage of that as a partner or as an API user and just use us as the engine that drives your email marketing. So with all of that said, we're going to jump into kind of the geekiness of how you would make all of this work. And the way that I've done this is by building some workflow diagrams that kind of show what some of the methods are and kind of walk you through some of those steps. So to begin with, we have two different APIs, and I think this is a source of confusion for a lot of folks. We have the Enterprise API, which is really intended to be used with individual accounts. So you have one vertical response account for your company or for your small business, and you just want to automate email creation. You want to automate list management. You want to do something that makes it so that it's much easier for you and your staff to use that vertical response account and connect it to whatever you've got going on within your own IT infrastructure. That's what the Enterprise API is for. And if you want to get the Enterprise API enabled, just go ahead and go to developers.verticalresponse.com. On that site, that's the entire developer network. It's where all of our content is. It's where all of the reference data is. Again, developers.verticalresponse.com. And I'll have these links at the end of this, by the way. If you go there, on the API documentation page is the form that you can fill out to request that the API be enabled for your account. Once the API is enabled on your account, free reign. You can do whatever you want to automate whatever processes you have. Now, the partner API is there for folks who are trying to resell our services, who want to provide vertical response for their customers, provide email marketing for their customers. And there's a lot of flexibility in how that works. The partner API does everything that the enterprise API does, and that's all of that email creation, list management, reporting, so you can get back all of the summary data, all of the clicks, and all of the opens for a specific account. And you can dive all the way down and see who clicked and who opened and who didn't respond. All of that's accessible through the API as CSV files that you can process and parse and do whatever you want with to get the data you need. So that's what the enterprise API does. The partner API does all of that. Plus, it allows you to create and manage sub-accounts under your partnership umbrella. So for every single one of your customers or for every department or however you want to organize it, you can have a sub-account on Vertical Response that your master account can feed into. And part of the benefit of that is you can transfer and share credits among those accounts, so you can come up with all kinds of really creative ways to resell our services and resell our credits and maybe make additional money or take advantage of our bulk pricing. You can also take advantage of single sign-on. So again, it looks like a much tighter integration, even though you're leveraging all of the work that we've done into making a simple-to-use email marketing experience. And of course, you get all the benefits of a partner account, which includes Partner Success Manager, direct access to the Partner Integration Manager, that's me, and all the other great benefits that come with being a partner, including rev share opportunities. So there's a lot of opportunity, not just for enterprise API individual customers, but also if you love vertical response enough that you want to resell it and provide it to other customers. Both of our APIs use the SOAP Web Services protocol, and it has a fully valid WSDL. Now, the benefits of this are, of course, it's like I said, completely language and platform agnostic. I don't care if you're using C# on Windows 7 or if you're using Django running Python on CentOS. It doesn't really matter. Both of those have client libraries that will take that WSDL, turn it into code that you can use right away and do all the dirty work for you. So that's the real benefit of using not just a valid WSDL, but SOAP services in general, is it allows you to take advantage of the client libraries that exist out there that will build a lot of that step code and take a lot of the work off your back so that all you have to do is access the objects you're already familiar with. And SOAP, of course, is very mature, very, very mature, and very widely supported. I can't think of a language that doesn't have some form of SOAP services, some form of code generation from a WSDL. And believe me, I've seen most of the languages out there so far and have had to support even the obscure ones I'd never heard of before. So it's been a lot of fun. So as I said, here come the workflow diagrams. This is the mailing list workflow. So this is pretty much one of the most basic forms of integration. Most people have some list of emails that they are already collecting, like I said, whether it be through their e-commerce or through people signing up to comment on a blog or what have you, and they want to market to it. And the basic workflow for almost all of our API calls is the same. You start off with a login. So you have to log in with your username and your password. If you are a partner and you're logging into a sub-account, there's an additional parameter, which is impersonate user. That is the username or the email address of the account you want to act on behalf of that exists under your partnership. If you're using the enterprise API, though, all you got to worry about is the username and password and how long you want the session to last in minutes. What you'll get back from that is what looks like an MD5 hash, which is your session ID. And that session ID is good for as long as the session duration states. And you'll continue to make every call passing that session ID. Every single call requires it. So the next step here is if you're going to create a new list or you want to use an existing list. If you want to create a new list, surprise, surprise, you call the method called createList. You call out the session, the name of the list, the type of the list, which used to be required, but that's becoming less required now, and there's a variety of reasons for that, but eventually the type will go away and will no longer be required. And any custom field names you want to add, and this is actually one of the more powerful features of vertical response lists. Of course, every list comes with a default field, email address, first name, last name, etc. But if you've got data stored in your system, for example, total purchases in 2012, year to date, or a custom ID. That's probably more important. A custom ID that your system uses to recognize that email address. You can pass that as a custom field. And even if you don't use that as a merge field in the email that goes out, which is to say, I don't necessarily want my emails to say, "Dear customer ID 12345," right? I mean, that's ridiculous. But that data is still going to be stored in that list, and so anything that happens to that user, to that recipient, even if you haven't used that in the merge field, you'll still be able to collect data that gets tied back to that record, and then you'll be able to import that back into your system and use that custom ID to identify them within your system and reassociate that. So that's a really nice feature there. The other opportunity, if you don't want to create a new list, if you want to use an existing list, is you can either store those list IDs within your system in a database, or you can call enumerate lists in our system. That will show you every list under the account that you're accessing, and along with the list ID. And for that, you just need to supply the session ID. So once you've got that back, you'll select the list that you want to add people to. You can either get the ID back from create list or select it from the enumerate lists. You'll collect the appropriate data from your local data source. You must format that data as a CSV in memory. So if you've got lots and lots of people that you want to add in one shot, we have a special method here called append file to list that allows you to aggregate several list members, several list records in one shot. You format as a CSV, you encode it in base 64, and then you pass that to append file to list. Now, having said that, you're probably saying, well, what about if I just want to add one person? You can certainly add one person. It's just add list members, the name of that method. And again, all of this documentation is on developers.verticalresponse.com. But append file to list is the most efficient way of adding list members, especially if you're adding more than one at a time. And really, if you're adding one at a time, you should be saving that in your local data store and then batching that upload to us on a periodic basis. Once you've called append file to list, the response back will be any invalid lists that didn't get imported, list members that didn't get imported. A reason somebody might not be imported is because they've already been marked as bounced in your account, they've already been marked as unsubscribed in your account, or because the email address is just badly formed. And you'll get all that information as the response back from that call, so you can do whatever you want with it from there. And then you've completed the entire sync of the list. Now this looks like a really daunting, like a lot of work. You write this in code one time, it works. You call it with a push of a button or with a script send every single time. Very, very easy. Email creation works a very similar way. So again, you want to start with a login, get the session ID back, and then on your side you'll have email content. Now, this is typically used in those cases where you have templates that you want your customers or your marketing team or whomever to use, but we don't have template storage in our system as of right now. So this is one way to provide that to them. You store the templates on your end, you generate the email content, you pass it to us via this email object, and you can see in the email object, these are all the fields that are required. There's additional fields that you can also provide, but these are the required ones. The name of it so that you can recognize it in your list, the subject of the email type, which is, especially if you're going to be doing any kind of editing afterwards, I suggest you make that email type be Canvas. The from label, which is what appears in the from part of the recipient's email. So when you get the email, when the recipient sees the email and they see under the from column, that is what appears there. It's going to typically be your company's name or the sender's name. The reply to email address is the email address that anything that we get that we don't identify as a bounce or an unsubscribe when somebody hits reply to an email that you've sent them, that will be sent to this reply to address. Folks are not typically trained to want to reply to email newsletters, but it happens,
True.
and we got to send it somewhere, and we're going to send it to you. But then here's the most important part, the free-form HTML and the free-form text. This is actually the contents of the email. Now, if you're not new to the API, you may have been using it for a while, and you're checking this right now because you want to see what's new. You might be used to something called the create email campaign. That was the name of the old method. And that was a real Byzantine process of arrays within arrays. This is highly simplified. This is a much simpler way to call. And more importantly, when you use the email object and then you use the create email method, you'll be creating emails in the new workflow. The new workflow, which by the way is now about
Is
a
not
year
new.
old, it's not new anymore, but we still refer to it as the new workflow because the legacy workflow, we're starting to cut that off and we're starting to see that drop. And now the new workflow is completely compatible with the API. So even if you are still using those old methods, I recommend going back and refactoring and replacing the create email campaign calls with the create email calls. You'll thank me later, trust me. When you call create email, you'll get a campaign ID back. You can use that campaign ID, store it locally, do whatever you want. One use of this is to then pass that on to the post-login path of single sign-on, which I'll get to in a minute. If you pass that to a special URL that you can provide to single sign-on, you can immediately drop a user into our email creation tools where they can edit the thing you've just created and complete the workflow within our tool. But if you don't want to do that, if you want to complete it within your own tool, then the next step is to select the list that you want to send this to, and that comes from lists that are stored by, you can call enumerate lists to get that list of lists, or maybe you know what that already is because it's in your database, whatever it may be. You take that array of lists, even if it's just one, you pass it as an array. You call set campaign lists with the ID that you got back from create email and the IDs of the list within an array. And then you can call launch email campaign. And launch email campaign does exactly that. It launches the email. That means it's going to go out to the list you just attached, and the result will be the launch summary report, which will tell you what worked, what didn't, what the next status is, etc. And then you can continually check the status of that by calling enumerate email campaigns, limiting it to the ID that you got in campaign ID, and you can update the status from there. So this is specifically for partners. If you're talking about creating a sub-account, again, you log in using your master account credentials. Now here's the trick. I think I said in the previous ones here, yeah, you'll see there's impersonate user in that login. That's optional. That's only if you're a partner and only if you're logging into a sub-account in order to create the email or create a list or whatever. If, however, you're performing actions on your sub-accounts or creating new sub-accounts, you will not use impersonate user because you're not impersonating one. You're going to use your master account credentials. So you'll log in using your master account credentials. You'll get that session ID. You'll obtain whatever company information you need that you've already got in your system that we require in order to create the new account. Now, creating an account in Vertical Response is a two-step process. The first step is create the company object. So you'll pass over all the company information, the name of the company. It says user ID, but you'll skip that for now because it's not required because you haven't created the user yet. The password for the account, the first name, the last name, and the status. Then you'll call create company, passing that object to it, and that'll get you a company ID back. The next step is to get the user information for that specific user, and that's their email address, the password, the company ID you just created, their first name, their last name, their status, etc. And you'll pass that on to create user. Now, you're going to see this, you're going to say, oh, this is fantastic. I can create multiple users under a single company. This is great. No. Fight the temptation. We do not currently support multiple users under a single company. Every account is one company, one user. It's my goal to very soon have a single create account call that will combine these two. But I recommend for now you just stick with creating a company and then creating a user. Now here's another gotcha on this. If you create a company and don't create the user, then that company is just going to float up there and it's not going to be useful. If you try to call create user first, you'll get an error back saying that the company ID is required. It's a little catch-22, but that's what keeps you going and keeps you honest in creating the company first and then the user. If you create multiple users under a single company, you're going to have to contact me because we're going to have to fix it. So single sign-on. This is actually very cool and very powerful, especially for partners, and that's actually there for partners. So again, you're going to call login. You're going to log in as the master account. You're going to get the session ID. Then you're going to get the user's email address, the email address for the account that you want to log into. And then you pass that to get user sign-on URL. Get user sign-on URL is going to return to you a URL that you can then send to your end user's browser, either through an iframe source or as a redirect or just as a new window. Now here's where it gets really powerful. I don't have it in here, but one of the parameters is post login path. But post login path by default, let me take a step back. By default, this URL will log the user into their home page in Vertical Response. And that's the home page where you see the boxes that show the emails that are currently in draft form, the emails that have been sent with the reporting, and any of that other kind of high-level summary data. If you want instead to log them straight into list management, or even better, into an email campaign you just created through the API containing your template, then you can use the post login path to direct them straight into that URL with the ID of the list or the ID of the campaign or whatever it is that you want them to immediately begin to edit. So that's one of the powerful features behind this. I think I mentioned earlier that you create the template, you create the email campaign, and then you get the campaign ID back. You can then take the URL. Actually, there's a URL on the developer site that's a special URL for this that you pass as post-login path with the ID you got back from create email, and that will automatically drop them into the Canvas tool where they can immediately begin to edit the email campaign you just created with the template you just provided. It's a really great way to provide template management and provide some really tight integration with your system without spending a ton of development resources. So what's coming next on the API? Quite a bit, actually. We've been working behind the scenes to identify opportunities for expanding the API and to get some of the new services and new functionality that we've added to Vertical Response accessible through the API. So that's going to be coming soon. I don't have exact dates, and since this is going to be recorded, I'm okay with that. I'm also working on improving the API documentation. This is actually a constant process. But some of the feedback I've gotten from you guys is you're trying to find information on there, and it's pretty good. And a lot of the stuff is already there, but it needs to be more accessible. Some of the more important things need to be floated to the top. One of the results of that was actually the API guide, which I developed probably about 6 months or more ago, and I'll be releasing the newest version within the next couple weeks. The API guide will walk you through everything you need to know about getting started with the API and all of the different functions you can expect to use in the most common types of integration. It's really meant to be your guidebook to the rest of our developer site and the rest of the documentation for the API. And that, again, is available at developers.verticalresponse.com.
That's what I was just going to ask.
Look at me. developers.verticalresponse.com/API. That's where it's located. That's where all of our documentation is. And it's constantly being updated thanks to your feedback. So please keep it coming. A developer community. We've already got forms within our, oh boy, I can never remember what it's called, the lounge, within the lounge. So we've got a forum within the lounge right now. And there's going to be more enhancements to that community. One of the things that should be coming soon is the ability to help you find developers if you don't have a developer who can work with our API. That's something I've been working on behind the scenes, and that should be up there very soon. And then, of course, enhanced web services. And one of the things that has been on our roadmap forever is getting a RESTful version of the API out. That's still on the roadmap. That's still coming. It should be coming sooner rather than later. That's something I've been working on very hard. So we will be getting these up to you soon. Here's all the links to everything that I talked about. Again, the documentation, I'm just going to keep hammering this in, developers.verticalresponse.com. It's surprising to me how very few people have gone there and checked it out before they've talked to me, and then once I point them in that direction, it changes everything. So all the documentation is there, and again, if you find something missing, you've got information that you want, for the love of God, please let me know. Send that to me. I'm more than happy to do it. And then as far as the main languages that we support, I mean, just because your language isn't on here doesn't mean we don't support it. And I'll see that, I just noticed that Java is not on here, and we do support Java very actively. But the PHP SOAP client, that's already part of the PHP, it's already part of the PHP stack, and that's the one I recommend. I know a lot of folks use new SOAP, and if that's what you're more comfortable with, use that. SOAPLite for Perl, it's actually been around for a long time, very well supported. There's Ruby, there's the soap.rb, but there's also Savon, which a lot of people use as well. Those are the two I recommend for Ruby. And then for .NET, I recommend using a system resource. Visual Studio has a really nice system resource that allows you to just drop in the WSDL, and it builds all the stub code for you right then and there. And every time we have to make an update to our WSDL, you just drop in that URL, you rebuild that code, you're good to go. It's really, really nice. Very, very nice functionality. So that's it. If you've got any questions, anything you want to add, anything you want to ask me that you don't think of today, please don't be afraid to contact me. There's my email address. That's what it's there for. If you're looking for enterprise support, you can send email to API support as well. As of right now, that goes to me as well. So that's just two different ways for you to get a hold of Rob Z. So any questions? I'd love to hear them now. Oh, hey, look at that. I took it all the way to the end.
You did. Let's leave up your contact info, though, while we do some Q&A. I'm not seeing any questions right now. But one of the things that I would like to point out from this webinar is that some of that might have been really technical. I know I'm kind of smart, but I didn't know everything that Rob talked about. But I think the important thing to see is that the API is available for you to be able to customize the things you're doing on your own side and link it up to what you're doing in your vertical response account. So if you're collecting email addresses on your website using a program that you like, you can link that data to go back into your vertical response account. You don't have to switch things over. You don't need to get another person in there to change what your website is doing. You can continue to use what you like and then access all of that through the API on your vertical response account.
One of the benefits of the API being built on SOAP and open protocols is that really, as long as you find a programmer who knows your language well and your platform well, you can go ahead and hire them, and with very little training, they can start picking this up right away.
Yeah.
I know a lot of folks who go on to Elance or Odesk or some of these other companies and find a temporary developer just to get this stuff up and running, and it's worked out very well.
Mm-hmm.